Okay, because there was 2 weeks ago when we needed to make a motion during a workshop to write the letter to the legislature where we allowed the public that was present and online to make comments. So we unmuted them, and we wouldn't have known if the person that was online couldn't like raise their hand and say, hey, I want to say something, you know. Okay. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm talking about, though. Like, for me personally, I'm fumbling around trying to find, okay, where's the chat section? Let me find my little raise my hand button. You know, by the time I raise my hand, public speaking's over. You know, if I can't, if people can't see me, where I'm going, okay, just a second, you know, because that does take me a while to. I don't like laptops, so I still have a mouse here.
Nice.
I can't find my mouse.
Yeah, I put it in my purse and carry it with me. It even has a cord. It has a little tail. So anyway, I'm just saying, like, to be able to see the people up on the screen, I don't have a problem with that during public comment time. I don't think that that's really distracting, even if they are driving or eating or whatever. Making dinner, but during the times when we're supposed to be taking votes and we're supposed to be listening to presentations or whatever, then it does get distracting if there's somebody up here on the screen, you know, doing something that keeps bleeping in. So I think during public comment time, regardless of whether they've signed up or not, I think they should be able to, you know, have their faces seen. And then when we go to do business, we just shut off the pictures and move on with business. But that's just my 2 cents.
Councilmember Watson.
Well, I would agree with her that during, like, for example, tonight you've got citizen comments. They wouldn't have signed up to make a comment yet. So I think it should be changed for when you have a discussion and looking for action, then we should turn all the cameras on to see if anybody else wants to make a comment during that time. If no one puts their hand up. Then
Yeah.
Just a technical aspect is we can disable a camera and enable the ability for them to turn it back on. But if we enable the camera, it does not go into their room and re-enable the camera. They would have to then know, oh, now I can turn my camera back on. So it's not, we can disable a camera, but we do not have the ability to turn on their cameras after we've disabled or
through the government. You should be able to do that.
We should be able to, but we cannot. So
get complete control.
we wouldn't be able. We would be able to allow them the ability, but we cannot control their camera to turn it on. So I just want to make a differentiation there. That whether you allow it or disallow it, we don't have the ability to turn their cameras on.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that would be where I'm speaking to, you know, open discussion, anything from the first, you know, 15 minutes of the council meeting where we're having like open discussions or we're allowing people to come up and speak from the public. So during that time, until we're done with public comment, we leave the cameras on. It's nice to, you know, come in and sit down and see who's on your computer and go, oh, I know that person. I know that person. Oh, I can, you know, we can see who's sitting in the audience, and it's nice to be able to, you know, kind of catch up, and you can go, oh, my friend's on here. I'm going to text my friend, you know, I see you on my computer. You're at the meeting too, you know. So I mean, just kind of like a welcoming time where, you know, we come in and we chat. We try to make things, you know, happy and happy-go-lucky. So I think, you know, up until the time that we're actually literally starting business, then we can shut down the cameras and we can't turn them back on at that point. But I don't know, just until public comment is over. I mean, that's just my thought. I don't know. I don't have a problem with it.
Councilmember Swatman.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting. So I love the perspective of the new council members because if they are going to use a virtual format, if we allow that, I didn't have a problem with the way it was written, and I was thinking, oh yeah, it makes sense. And now after listening to council members, I'm like thinking, oh, I get it. They're virtually there, so they better be virtually there. And what is our right to, turn them off or on? Frankly, I would leave them on and just kind of have to deal with it, because there could be rowdy members in the audience. They could be holding up signs or what have you, or, audience if they'd like to do that. So if we're going to have a virtual format, to me, I think they should have a virtual format. And whether I like what they're saying or not, I agree completely. It's very distracting. That was kind of fun watching people, trying to figure out what they're doing there. But that's the nature of our job, to me, is to be open and inclusive to the public. And if that's a format they want to use, then I would leave them on. I wouldn't change anything. You have to figure out how to deal with them when those situations come up, when they're doing things that are completely inappropriate, just like, the police chief would do if an audience member was yelling or screaming, and they would have to deal with the sergeant at arms deal. Now, you got to have that covered somehow too, I guess. Thank you.
Guys are funny.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yeah. So I think the other question that I had, or maybe it's a comment, or maybe it's a thought. Anyway, I do have. I'm not a huge fan of the sign up by 5 p.m. for the online people, because I also feel that there have been times when I have been, up there virtually, not that, but in another situation, and so being up on the camera virtually. And then as you're hearing discussions, starting to, come to fruition, then I will have then maybe another thought. Or maybe somebody has even, and we've had this issue where there's been some sort of poignant issue that we are talking about here at the council. And then people were told, last minute, hey, come into the council meeting. And so the people that show up here, they get an opportunity, to talk if they've thought of something, while we've been talking about something. And I know it's about the management of people, but again, we have to be careful that we're not doing things that are easier and more convenient at the expense of people having the opportunity to talk to us. And I can understand if we have hundreds of people, but let's be honest, we don't have that many people that are online, right? It's not a lot. If it did become a lot, where suddenly we became really popular and hundreds of people wanted to come, on there, then maybe we need to reconsider that. But I'm not a fan of the sign up by 5 p.m. for online also.
Councilmember McClymans.
Just to make sure I understand this is a policy and we're not changing the municipal code. Okay. And so this is really more a set of directions of how we're going to handle the meetings. I guess I would echo the way I could support this is if we made an amendment to this to waive the 5 o'clock sign up fee and to unmute all the audience, to make an announcement and to tell the audience they're unmuted when it comes to public comment, because that's the closest thing we could get to having in my mind, we want to make it so that the people who are online equivalent to being virtually in the audience, right? So, and that would be the closest thing. I guess, because I thought about this, my first thing was, what? And then I thought, well, actually, there is decorum, and we do actually talk about decorum in the municipal code, and we do expect there is a sergeant at arms, and if people were getting goofy, right? I suspect that sergeant at arms would jump into action and keep people from being goofy. And then so we could do the same thing online, right? So it wouldn't hurt to say auto mute, come in. Everywhere I work, that's just what we do. All cameras off, all microphones off. The meeting organizer opens the meeting up and controls discussion. I don't have a real hard time with that, but I would say, I could support this if we were going to give direction. The direction would say during the public comment section, cameras and microphones were on. An announcement was made letting them know their ability to make comments, and especially addressing the virtual issues, and then remove the 5 o'clock. I don't see why people virtually can't make comments as easily as people who are here, because I work hard to get people to come, and I try to encourage people to come either virtually or in person. And not a lot of people feel comfortable addressing they're intimidated. So I think the harder we make it, the less we keep spending all this money on these public engagements things. We hire these contractors to go do public engagements, and then we turn around, we make it hard for them to come talk to us like face to face. So I'm done.
Okay. Councilmember Baldwin.
I 100% echo everything that yeah, I feel like you're saying exactly what I would agree to as well, as far as the waiving of the 5 o'clock sign up and enabling the mics and enabling, not opening, right? Because Chuck, you said specifically that I wouldn't want you to be able to turn on my camera if I had my camera off.
Or
That would be a
That goes with the microphones also. We can
Yeah.
re-enable them, but they're still going to
It's
be
their
muted
choice.
on their side.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which should be, yeah.
So, should we make a motion to amend this then? And is that, sorry.
Go ahead.
One more comment.
Please.
I don't want to take any action tonight because it's a workshop. It's not a council meeting. I don't understand what's expedient about this. We're not going to pay a bill, right? We're not racing some sort of a grant or something. So I would say, we bring this back to council and maybe amended, kind of like we described.
Councilmember
How
Evans.
would you monitor? So, all right, everyone virtually, we now have an open door. Cameras are on. How would you monitor who starts talking and when and all of that?
They raise their hand.
Councilmember Baldwin, yeah.
If they want to be on camera, what if I'm sitting shirtless in a tanning bed and I'm listening to it, but I want to talk?
Then you can raise your hand with the button that I was talking about that I can't find.
I don't think you have to turn on your camera. I don't think you should be forced to turn on
No,
your
you don't have to.
I think
Yeah,
just,
but I'm
like,
just like when
People
you,
want to see.
just like when we're here, is there anybody else? You wait a minute, you look around. If anybody else want to say anything, after a minute or 30 seconds, whatever it is, if people have had an opportunity to speak up, then at that point, you either give them the opportunity or there is nobody else and you move on.
I would much rather it be off until it's public discussion time. Make an announcement, public discussion. The cameras are now enabled. Should you wish to turn them on, or anyone that is signed up, enable them. At the end of public discussion, they're back off again. That way, the distractions are gone. The ability for them to speak is there. It's no different than if they were standing here. We would expect them to sit quietly in there rather than jump around. And if someone brought in a hot plate and started cooking eggs here and their camera kept falling, are we not going to be distracted by that?
Yeah.
It's, we wouldn't allow that here. So, and we can't control that there. So I think
But
that
you
be
would
nice.
you would allow an audience member to hold up a sign.
Sure. And during the time,
So yeah, I just heard you say they'll turn off their video.
turn it on during the discussion time.
So you would tell all the audience to leave when we start to actually vote? This is what I'm hearing.
I don't think that's
I'm just saying, I get input from the audience, I'm like, as Councilmember Baldwin mentions it, I'm looking at people out there when we're trying to do the discussion. It's, our business, there's no public comment during that time period, so the public doesn't participate. But if we're in a discussion and everything, I'm actually looking at the audience too and trying to get feedback from people, but, that's just my.
You're getting feedback from that 1 inch by 2 inch
I know.
square on your monitor in front of
Yeah,
you.
yeah, isn't that scary?
Well, if
Yeah.
they're shaking their head,
Hey, Mom, can I have macaroni and cheese? Oh, shoot.
Yeah,
Dan sees that.
I know.
And now we're voting no because they're
No,
they can't have
that's
macaroni
just
and cheese and we
me,
were
not
voting on
you.
parks.
Just me, not you. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm just saying I don't think that's necessary. If they want to be heard, there's an opportunity for that to be heard on camera in
Sure.
audio
Yeah.
at that time.
You're just, to me, again, along the line of the Councilmember Baldwin was talking about, you're limiting their ability to interact with their elected officials, right?
Not at all.
Well, I'm hearing you say that turn the video off.
This was not an option 3 years ago. We are enabling them to speak to us in a larger capacity than ever before,
Okay. Right. We do have the video option that's available, though.
but not for discussion.
Nope.
So 3 years ago, pre-COVID,
Yeah.
You had to walk through those doors and sit in here.
Yeah. And that's why, again, along with, I'm deferring to my youngest council member, I believe, that, that it's a new world and that their expectation is that they want to have, I don't know, I could be completely wrong. But 20 years ago, you had to walk into here. There's no way, right?
I think right now we're giving them an opportunity to be even more engaged than ever before. It's just within that engagement, there are still going to be, or there should still be, decorum.
Well, that's
And what's reasonable, right? I think that's really what a lot of things come down to. Is this reasonable to be able to monitor the city council meeting, listen to the discussion, and when it's your turn to speak, when you have public comment, turn on your video, turn on your audio, say what it is you want to say. In fact, during the entire time, they can all have their video on, and we can see you and all that kind of stuff, and go through that. And then turn it off so that we can get back down to what's our business is, our duty for them. As Councilmember Evans said, I think you can look at it from a glass half full or glass half empty, right? Is it half empty because now we're turning your cameras off, or is it half full because, hey, a couple years ago we didn't even have this as an opportunity? I think we're trying to engage the public and get them to be around and come talk to us and all that kind of stuff. And I just think it's reasonable to turn the cameras on at that point and not be a distraction at other points. That just seems reasonable to me.
You can complain that a rose bush has thorns, or you can rejoice that a thorn bush has roses.
There you go. Councilmember Fullerton.
So that takes me right back to like at the beginning of the meeting. When I walk in, I actually love to see how many people are joining us online, and I get to see their faces. Like right now, I don't know who A is, I don't know who CP is, and I don't know who DB is. It would be cool if I could see their faces and go, hey, welcome, and just pretend like they're in the room. And then once we're done with public discussion, open discussion, then we go ahead and say, okay, at this time we're going to turn off the cameras because we're going to, and mute the microphones because we're going to get down to the nitty gritty stuff, but we've allowed people to come in. It's like they've walked into the room and they can raise their hand if they want to speak, just like somebody who's here that hasn't signed up. They just walked in and they heard something and they're like, hey, I want to comment on what that last guy commented on, I agree with that, or I disagree with that. And there will be times when people that are online, and if we can see them, we're just kind of, it just feels more welcoming to see them on the computer, see their face. And then, like I said, usually public comment time is done by 6:15 and 6:10 sometimes, if there's nobody to talk, and then we can just be on with the meeting. And we don't have to worry about any interruptions or anything. It's like meet and greet when we first walk in the room and we see happy faces or mad faces or whatever on the camera. And then we just, like I get to shake Angela's hand, Councilmember Baldwin's hand, and other council members' hands. I get to say welcome, and then I get to see somebody and they can hear me on the microphone. I can go, hey, welcome, DB, but
It does say their name down below the initials, though.
well, I don't have my camera on my thing. I can't read up there right now, but I don't know. I just think it would be more welcoming and more inviting if people can kind of just raise their hand, we can see their faces, and then we'll be like, okay, public comment time is over. We're going to mute the mics and we're going to get on with business.
Councilmember Baldwin.
I just want to start off by saying I always just really love our discussions because they get me thinking, and you guys have a lot of great things to say. Maybe I was misunderstanding, but Justin, I feel like you're saying the same thing that Kelly's saying. Are you?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, that's what I was feeling.
You got your normal window that you would be able to stand up and be seen and heard.
Okay, I think I'm still I'm still teeter-tottering in this because I agree. I think that there's great argument behind that as far as the reasoning behind it. I think the thing that is I'm still hanging on to is what McClymonds had said in regards to making sure that what's happening here is as equitable as what's happening online. Even if it's a new thing that we're doing post-COVID, I still feel like those people should be able to show up and have the same, opportunities as these people. Whether that means they don't talk during a certain period of time or we don't hear them, that's one thing. But yeah, I do go back and forth with the fact that we are trying to engage with citizens. We're throwing money at attempting to do that. And then it's like, well, how can we also limit them? And so that's where I'm struggling between kind of the two schools of thought that have been offered. So I don't know that I know what to say.
Councilmember Watson.
With all this discussion going on, I think this should go back to clerk's office and think about what we talked about and bring it back to us. I'd like to table this for now. We can go on for quite a while about this. I understand where you're all coming from. I understand why they put it forward to us for approval. So I'm kind of torn both ways. I first looked at it and I agree upon it should be done. But the things you ladies have talked about, everyone else in here has talked about too. So I think we should look at what's the most convenient for us and works for the council. We've been very organized in the past where we have people coming to talk to us. They sign up first, and then the clerk tells us who wants to talk, and they get up and talk, say their name, and say what they have on their mind. Sometimes, as we talked about, people in the audience say, oh, I need something else to talk about. Mm-hmm. So we allow them to come forward and talk to us too. And maybe people online that didn't plan on talking to us would be an opportunity for them also. So I'm kind of torn in between which way to go because I think it should be done, but then again, maybe we should tweak it a little bit.
Come back with an amendment. Councilmember McClymonds.
Yeah, not to belabor this much, but I just want to say that so workshops are when I look forward to kind of like understanding what everybody thinks, right? Where are the thorn bushes and where are the roses type of thing. And I just wanted to ask a couple questions because Council Member Swatman kind of triggered me a little bit. This is supposed to be a safe place, but you triggered me. So anyway, it triggered me just a little bit because I wanted to ask. So when I sit up here, it's hard to make some of these decisions, even though sometimes you think, oh well, this should be pretty straightforward. But then you hear people talk, and you see the people who come out who are interested. When people actually take the time to come, it means something. Or when you're online, so to me. That does affect the way I think and vote, obviously. Am I the only one that's that affected by that?
No, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
There's more than one of me.
So the whole thing about having a sign up, I mean, that is valid. Or when somebody comes, I can think of two people that had just looked at me during the whole meeting for a couple of topics when I was like, oh, I get it. You're really concerned about this, right? And you really think that I'm, you and I need to talk. So I get that. So, and it's important. I think that's super important for what we do. So, all right, that's all I got. Okay.
And I was just going to piggyback off of the removal of the 5 o'clock amendment that you'd suggested. I think if we say, all right, everyone that has signed up is done, anyone else for the good of the order, just like we would do here, I would be fully in support of that because, someone may get up and say something that does trigger a message or something else that wants to get said. So I'm not opposed to scrapping that line at all.
So it sounds like we could table this, bring it back with an amendment to not have this sign up work, at least have a question once everybody's done. If anybody else has anything for the good of the order, having people's video on during the community opportunity to speak. I think that's about it. Does that cover whatever I think most people are wanting? Okay. So go ahead.
Confirm what I'm hearing, since we'll be doing the work on this. I'm hearing consensus around bringing back an amendment that would allow the audience or allow the city to enable cameras and mics during public comment period. that would change the language on the agenda where signups by 5 p.m. are required to encouraged. Change the practice so that when there's a public comment or public hearing, the clerk would announce that cameras and mics are now enabled by the participants. And at the end of the comment period or public hearing, as the case may be, there would be a call by the mayor or whoever's chairing the meeting. Anyone else online wishing to speak, they would be allowed to speak. I would ask that that the clerk's office be authorized to mute microphones and cameras, turn off cameras in the case of someone being disruptive. For example, someone's running for office and they're wearing a T-shirt. The city can get fined for that under PDC that says, vote for Mike. You would have the authority to, or if they're doing something, inappropriate, not family friendly, to turn that off. But if that is the general consensus, of course, you'll have the chance to discuss it again. We can bring that back.
Okay.
Did I capture that?
I believe that's the general
Right.
consensus.
Thank you.
So in order to table this, do we need a motion to table it? I'm not.
I did.
I get this. So, okay, a second. All right.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Motion is tabled. Thank you. I'm just going to add one last thing on that. I know the city clerk's office took a lot of heat in regards to this particular issue. And this issue came from me and my question in regards to some of this. So if you want to be mad at anybody, be mad at me. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to the FCS group presentation, I believe.
Is discussion later?
I'm sorry?
Is open discussion later?
Oh,
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
This was
That's
supposed to
the
go to
way
a
they
vote
were
for
written.
discussion.
It was supposed to, and there was a discussion on that. I
Oh,
believe,
okay.
Right?
Later on, your discussion, open
Okay,
discussion.
it's line C after the presentation. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll go to the presentation.
All right, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Round 3,
Welcome back.
early race study. All right, hopefully this won't be too controversial, but feel free to ask
You
any.
know how we are.
Well,
I'm here.
it's all good. We will end up stronger because of it. Let's see. This does not seem to be affecting the presentation.
We turned off the
Video and audio.
mics.
With an arrow, but yeah.
Just, yeah, one presentation for us, one presentation for the public.
Is that the old one you have?
This is the one that
Oh,
she
it was
sent me, I
sent,
think.
yeah.
She sent you. Well, I was trying to figure out, that wasn't included in our council.
Okay.
Not
No,
the
it
packet.
was
All right,
Carrie
so
a couple days ago.
Oh, we didn't
An
actually
email.
let the public see that. It wasn't on our.
Didn't
I was just noting that maybe I'm confused about, there's apparently a PowerPoint that was available previously or something, but it wasn't included on the agenda.
From Sherry.
That's fine, but again, it wasn't included on the publicly available agenda, apparently. I don't know if didn't know if that was true or not. Okay, yeah. Okay, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something.
It will be included though, right? Part of the,
We can get it.
sure, that's what I thought.
okay.
Thank you.
So let's see. Let's kind of skip to the meat here. So a couple of things that have changed. One of the big changes since last time, and actually for the Water SDC, there were a couple of things. The first thing, I think it came up at the last meeting, was the question of the Tacoma supply capacity and whether that was basically standby capacity that should not be considered when defining how many equivalent residential units the system can serve. And so Ryan and I both researched that and concluded independently that there is permanent wholesale capacity, and I think that's the 4 MGD that was mentioned before. And then there's also emergency intertie capabilities that go beyond that, but that 4 million gallons per day is a permanent commitment. And so there were no changes to the denominator of the water SDC calculation. It includes the 4 MGD.
So with that calculation, what if we didn't have any available water? Would that change the SDC fee?
If you did not have capacity, well, it would seem a little bit moot because if you didn't have any water, you couldn't allow any new connections.
No, yeah, you could say, why not, right? Because I'm going to play a little mathematical game, right? So what if I could buy one? If I need one, I'm going to go buy one, right?
If you need like an ERU of capacity, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Then, I mean, the tricky part is you have to ultimately, for the purpose of the calculation, define a denominator. And if there's no limit to your capacity, then
I don't know
if you can just go buy a new
right
equivalent unit of capacity and there's no limit to that, then there might have other implications for.
Yeah, but today I'm telling you right now in the water utility there is only like it's either 0 or 1 or math works. You know what I'm saying, right?
Not sure I'm following.
Well, because the whole concept for me, and maybe I'm wrong because maybe the council disagrees, is the fact that, you know, the new folks that move into the city need to pay their fair share to kind of get into the system, right?
Yes.
So ultimately, we want to be able to recover those costs, and I think that's a good philosophy, so that, you know, people can't just move in and the SDCs could be 0, because clearly the council could set the SDC at 0 or what have you, because, you know, some of the council could want a bunch of people to move in for a variety of reasons. But I think that the Bonnie Lakes philosophy is that, you know, we want to like make sure that new people, that they have the right to come here, that pay the appropriate whatever that is, because it's some amount, right? So that's the big discussion, whether it was more previous and now it's going to be less or what have you, just because supposedly we have all this capacity, right? So what if I got rid of that capacity? You know, you're saying that the calculation shows that you have 3 million gallons a day. What if I make that 0? But it probably doesn't work. You probably have to make it 1 or something because of the math. Because you can't divide by 0.
The capacity, like what, 1 million gallons per day, you're saying? Or I'm not sure what the one.
Well, I'm trying to make sure that the folks that move into the city pay their appropriate share, and you have to do that legally and mathematically.
Yes.
According to the calculator, you can't just invent that. So what's driving the cost way down? As I'm hearing that we have all this excess capacity.
Yes.
Well, I sold that, right? Because Councilmember Evans just bought 4 million gallons of capacity from the city of Bonnie Lake.
So yes, so if you did sell the capacity and you don't have it anymore, there would be an offset to the numerator as well, because there is an investment in the capacity.
Sure. Yeah.
So, you know, I can't say off the top of my head what the impact would be, but I mean, yes, you would reduce that denominator, but you'd also be reducing the numerator based on the assets that were the investment. For example, for the Tacoma supply, there was a historical system development charge that was paid to Tacoma.
Right.
And so basically, if you didn't have that capacity, that investment would go out of the calculation.
Right. Yeah. Is that math available to us?
I don't have it on me right now. I mean, if it was something, I mean, it could be potentially a scenario, but I mean, I guess,
didn't know if we could play with it, you know, because there's a lot of other people that supposedly are very interested in water rates, right? You know, I've been repeatedly in contact with many people. They're allowed to come to these public meetings and they're out there and they don't come. So I'm giving them a hard time, right? Because every October or whatever it is, that there will be hundreds of people that contact their council members and say, why are these water rates so high? And I can't believe this, you know, that scenario, right? On and on and on. We have 0 public in the audience. We could have some more online.
So, I mean,
They could study those calculations. You're showing me numbers, and are those, how are those numbers arrived at?
If I could, Chris, I think in your presentation a couple slides previously, you basically show the equation that you've been using to determine that
Yes.
value, correct?
Good.
And so, I mean, that's it right there, the general methodology.
Right. Okay.
Existing system cost plus future project cost over existing and added capacity. And I think one of the big changes here also to consider, though, is that when we went through this analysis this time, we spent a lot of time looking at our existing system costs as well. And in doing that, we were able to further refine exactly what the value of our existing system is. So it's not just a matter of just the fact that the existing or the source capacity may change. It's the entire formula. But I'm sure that we could make that available to anyone to discuss.
Well, it looks like it's right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Perfect.
Councilmember Fullerton.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the chart here, and for the 2008 calculation, it says supply, other, and total. And then for the 2022 calculation, there's supply, fire, other, and total. So where does the fire come in? Is this because we've added the necessity to put fire sprinklers in residential homes, or why is, because that's a big number, $942.
So I think the 2008 calculation included a lot of that stuff, but it was lumped into the other category. And some of it's also summarizing things in a table that can fit on a presentation slide. I would say in the 2008 calculation, I pulled apart the 2 components that had different denominators just to show here, to go back to that equation from a few slides ago. The fire component here is just taking out costs associated with assets that provide fire flow either directly or indirectly. And so it's sharpening the pencil on that allocation.
That's the tankage and pressure zones.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to the extent that there were costs associated with fire protection in the 2008 calculation, those would be lumped into that other column.
Is that what fire pays us?
No, this is the purpose of this is to recognize that, for example, a multifamily and commercial building has a higher fire flow requirement, and so there's a greater share of capacity that's needed to deliver that fire flow. And so that's why the updated calculation calls that out specifically, so that because the city has different SDCs for commercial, single family, multifamily, and that's really the basis for it. Because, I mean, a unit of supply is the same whether it's used by a business or a home. When you get into fire flow, then you have differences in the way that they use the system and the capacity needs, and that's what that's trying to recognize.
So fire flow meaning like sprinkler systems?
Yes.
Okay, so there's another, right there, there's $942.
They're talking the external to the system wise, right? The tankage, external to the home.
Like a fire hydrant?
Well, that's part of it. So the fire hydrants are directly involved in providing fire protection. And then you have your mains have to be oversized to provide enough water to meet peak day demands and also fire flow. And fire flow requirements, they vary based on the type of development. So single family might be, I think, 1,000 gallons per minute. Do you know those off the top of your head?
No, not off the top of my
It
head.
has nothing to do with whether the homeowner has
No, it does not have to do with your system plan has a standard. Single family needs 1,000 gallons per minute for 120 minutes. Commercial needs 2,000 gallons a minute for 4 hours. I mean, those aren't the exact numbers, but so basically they need a higher level of fire flow, and you have to upsize your system in order to be able to deliver 2,000 gallons a minute.
And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong here, but basically what we're trying to do here is fill in the blanks from that formula that he was just showing us on the slide a little bit ago. So each one of those columns, from the top down to where it says net existing cost basis, is basically determining a dollar value for our pieces of asset in the water utility that do these different things, provide supply, fight fire, and so on. So where that column was not included in the 2008 calculation, we've actually broken it out separately here to refine the numbers and get a little bit more granular in the data. So hopefully we have a number that's more accurate. So it's strictly looking at value of assets in our water utility, not the sprinkler system in somebody's home.
Yeah, I mean, if the sprinkler system is privately owned, that's not going to be in here. But all the infrastructure that the city owns that delivers that fire flow water, that is in here. And I should mention, by calling that out to sharpen that pencil on equity, that actually does reduce the single family charge slightly, but it increases the multifamily and commercial charges because they're getting a greater share of that fire component. So that's not the main driver behind the decrease we're showing, but that does contribute to it. And so one other thing I wanted to mention was the previous calculations that we presented, we assumed that there was a $3 million federal appropriation for the Cedar View projects. And I think as of the last meeting, we had split that 50-50 between water and sewer. And then I think Ryan had mentioned that he thought it might only be available for sewer. And more recently, it sounds like that funding has been called into doubt altogether. So we have removed it from the analysis because don't want to artificially reduce the charge based on funding that we don't know that you're going to get.
Right. Where's Doug at?
And so that's why the SDC is a little bit higher than last time I was here. And then the sewer SDC also went up slightly because of that. Okay. And so the sewer SDC, I think we were around 11,700 or 11,800. It's a little over 11,000. And this calculation is the same, except we remove the federal appropriation as an offsetting funding source for the capital plan. And then the stormwater SDCs, they have not changed in this scenario. Basically, we were looking at the current charge, and actually I think I forgot to update the bottom of that table. That charge has been adjusted for inflation, so it's like $630 or so. And we're calculating a maximum charge of $16.65. And so just to give you a sense of, we have the existing SDCs, and you're third from the top in this comparison, and then you drop below Anacortes if you adopt the updated charges, which mainly there's a slight increase to sewer. There's a more material increase to stormwater because there's a lot more stuff that's been built since the charge was last calculated, kind of exceeding what you would get just from the inflationary adjustments that have been made.
And again, a system development charge, right? SDC?
Yes.
Is attributed to new development or what have you.
Yes, new development or redevelopment that increases demand. So if you're upsizing a water meter.
So the existing users, like the existing homeowners, wouldn't really have to pay an SDC?
They already have. I mean, to the extent that they're allocated a share of cost, like ultimately we're using an average cost method that says, here's your cost, here's your total equivalent units. They're going to pay for any costs that they need to through rates.
But this is a demonstration of kind of a legislative authority type of a thing, because we can't go above the math, but we could theoretically say, well, SDCs, we can make them nothing.
You could.
But somebody would have to pay for the infrastructure in the end, right?
So, the challenge is, then you're faced with either higher rate impacts or pushing projects out. And that's...
So this is a demonstration of trying to share the new charges on the new residents, as opposed to what we could do is put it on everyone.
Yes.
So, I just wanted to clarify, SDCs are a way to allocate the burden for the development of new capacity to the people bringing the demand for capacity. So I understand that correctly. And so then, to me, looking at this, what you're telling me is we can do that more effectively today than we could in 2008. So it's cheaper to do that today than it was in 2008?
I think the big issue was in 2008, to go back to the denominator, the main difference is the water. And the denominator is significantly higher. And part of it was, I think, back when that SDC was calculated, the Tacoma capacity was still sort of a variable. It was not something, I think, that was solidified.
Yeah, that's correct. The 2 million gallons per day, I don't think became something that was that was reality until 2012,
Yeah.
roughly. And Dan might know better than I, but it was something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
And then the additional 2 MGD beyond that to make it 4 only came into in 2018, 2019.
So I say that the big driver behind the reduction is recognizing that you have a permanent capacity investment that was not known at the time that the SDC was last calculated.
We've already bought all of that.
And
We paid for it.
capacity has been paid for, yes. And so it should be included in the numerator, the payments to Tacoma for that capacity. But the main factor is you're increasing the denominator by a greater percentage than the numerator. And that leads to a decrease in the cost per equivalent unit. So it's not necessarily providing it better. Now, I guess the hard part is the investments with Tacoma were based on some assessment of how much capacity do you need. And I know one thing that's happened over time is demands continue to go down on a per capita basis. And so if you were looking at that today, maybe you don't need as much as you purchased in the past. But this is the consequence of that. And we were able to sharpen the pencil on the denominator. And that's one of the key drivers behind the reduction.
Councilmember Clemens?
Yeah, so Councilmember Swatman stated so that the current SC at 5350 for water, we can't go higher than that? Is there's a legal, is there an RCW that says that we have to take this value out of the study and we're capped at the study's finding?
So what I would offer is the statute that authorizes you to impose connection charges, RCW 3592025, allows you to impose a charge based on an equitable share of the cost of the system. And so we have an updated estimate of what that equitable share is. So based on that, I think you'd have a hard time saying, let's stick at the current charge. When we're saying this is based on the current information, this is the best estimate of what the equitable share is per unit.
Yeah, and you have to be really careful when you're in this area too, right? Because the city's been sued. Palermo versus City of Bonnie Lake. Go look that one up. Have fun with that. So it's very legalistic and it's very procedurally driven, and that's why I kind of was questioning around our resources and our capacities that we have, so that if you could move some of those around, that some of the folks would look at me kind of sideways, but you can move assets around if you own them into different areas. But I don't know how the math, I'd have to go back and look and if it makes sense or not. He's like still scratching. He's like, what the heck is he talking? I'll tell you later.
I still come back to the giggle test that we think it's going to cost somewhere on the order of, $2,000 less per hookup to expand the capacity of the system.
Well, that's because we already previously bought it.
I think it's important, too, to remember that it's the expansion of the system consistent with the growth trends that we're seeing, right? And one of the things that we're going to need to continue to keep in mind is that we see development changing here in the city of Bonnie Lake. We don't have the heydays of the 2006s, maybe 2007 might not be when things started to drop. But we're seeing development changing, and we don't have a lot of the single-family big greenfield development stuff that's going on. We see a shift now towards commercial and multifamily. So in general, the infrastructure needed to support that, a lot of that, if you take, for instance, some of the multifamily developments, they're already located along water main that's already, running past the site. So that cost shifts as far as the value. I understand the concern about that being lower, but I feel confident in the calculation that was done to get us there. And so while it does look like a drastic drop, I believe it's a number that's consistent with our infrastructure and source capacities.
So at the risk of further derailing this discussion, I'll put it another way, maybe this will help. So the 2008 calculation was based on the number of ERUs, equivalent units that the system could serve, broken into supply and other. And so basically the supply system really defined a lot of the number of equivalent units that could be served. To the extent that the city has purchased extra capacity, you haven't had to make commensurate investments in the transmission system in order to deliver that water. So basically what's happening is you're taking a relatively fixed investment. Obviously there's been investments, per year, but you've taken a relatively stable pool of investments and now you're dividing it over a larger number because you are no longer constrained on that supply basis because you increased. So that's really the reason why it's going down. So particularly if you look at the water calculation here and there's that other component, that denominator is almost double what it was in the 2008 calculation. And that's the big difference there. And it's simply because the supply that you have now, the commitments that you have now enables you to serve that many more ERUs. And the tricky part about situations like this is when you have these kinds of expansions, you can have a jump or you can have in either direction in what your equivalent share per customer unit is.
What I heard you say is all the people that were bought in the heyday paid for our system at a higher price, and then we're going to turn around and continue to increase their burden by increasing the water rates instead of turning and facing the people who are coming in the community and asking them to pay an equivalent price. So are we double taxing the people who already came to Bonnie Lake and giving a break to the people who were just entering?
So the complicating issue with this SDCs is that it's not, you impose them to generate revenue for capital costs. Your authority is linked to recovering a fair share of costs from from growth, a fair share of the cost of the system. And that estimate has changed over time based on the information that's available. We had a defensible calculation back in 2008, and we have one that's defensible now. And there's just different information that has factored into it that was not available at the time of the previous calculation. So it's not so much a matter of, well, if we reduce this, we're going to shift the burden. Yes, reducing it will shift some burden to single-family homes. So existing customers. Reducing the SDC will shift some burden in theory compared to if you don't reduce it. But I don't think that not reducing it is a legally sound option. So I guess I wouldn't compare one scenario to another my guess is, you can ask the city attorney, but I think that there might be an issue if you knowingly charge more than what has been defined as an equitable share of the system.
Can't do that.
Councilmember Evans?
On your other chart, you have Auburn listed as the highest. Is that in the state or is that just against your comparables?
This is just the comparables. And what complicates things for Auburn is for the sewer charge in particular, they use King County for wastewater treatment and they have their capacity charge, which is recovered as a surcharge over 15 years. And so that's added in there.
And Chris, if I remember correctly, isn't the SDC fee that is charged by Auburn for sewer is actually put not on the developer, but it's put on the homeowner? Then they pay in installments over time.
I think Auburn has a local component that they charge to development.
So not that full
Not the full amount. Okay. But I would say the majority of that amount is Kane County's charge, which is put on the homeowner and recovered over 15 years. So, it's a little bit tricky they're included because of their geographic proximity to you. They're relatively close. But the Kane County thing is kind of a wrinkle in there. So it would be, and it's tricky because, you're trying to compare apples and apples. Auburn uses King County. They get all their costs with all their treatment infrastructure, transmission infrastructure, and so forth. You use Sumner for wastewater treatment, and so you're getting a proportionate share of their system. And so there are just differences that you can't readily tell just from looking at a comparison like this.
So sans apples, or Auburn's apples to oranges, we're moving from second to third?
Without Auburn, yes, you're moving from second to third.
You don't have too much of an idea, though. Those other facilities, like a Fife, could be literally saying that their real charge could be for sewer $10,000, and they could have set it at 42 legislatively.
Yeah, no, Fife is, I looked and did research as to when they updated their calculation, and it's been years, like over 10 years since that charge is updated. So that's one of the reasons why, they're at the bottom. So a system like Puyallup, I mean, they're just larger scale, and so they can spread those costs over a greater number of ERUs, and so the cost per customer goes down. There are also some methodology differences in some of the other ones. I mean, a comparison like this, there are so many variables that go into, like, well, why does somebody charge something while somebody else charges something different? And it's really hard to say, well, yours is, there's something that you're doing wrong or something you're doing right because of the methodology choices that have been made, or or there could be a policy decision. I mean, I was at another city doing an SDC update, and they decided they wanted to phase the increase in over 5 years, and so they're making a policy decision to not charge the full amount that they could.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of that going on in this summary.
Good luck with theirs.
All right. Any questions on SDCs? All right. Well, I will delve into the rate analysis. Okay. We covered a lot of that last time. Water, I would note that as of January 1st, there was the 8.5% rate increase that went into effect. That was from the 2017 study. I think that was the last increase that was recommended by that study. And the capital plan has stayed pretty much the same. I think one of the big differences, and I'll get over here, actually, I'll just go to this slide here. So the baseline scenario, and this is what I presented last time, pay as you go, there would be the 8.5% increase that was already baked into the 2023 rates, and then basically 5.5% per year for the next several years, and then kind of a 1% in 2028, kind of the tail end of the forecast. We ran an alternate scenario where we took into account the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund loan that the city obtained for the Lake Ridge Reservoir. And so based on the engineer's application, I think about $9.3 million in funds is available, but based on the estimate of the cost that is in the CIP, it's only like $7.7 million. So we are not assuming that the city needs the full amount. We're only drawing what we project the city does need, and then the rest of it can be a contingency in case costs are higher than expected. Then you have access to that funding. But the key point is that scenario allows you to bring the water rate increases beginning next year to CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which the city's standard policy is to adjust rates for inflation in the Consumer Price Index. And so this debt scenario would allow you to do that. And so then if we go to the water rate structure, this is the current rate structure. We've got the base charge by meter size, inside and outside city. We've got the volume charges by block, both winter and summer. I think we discussed the key issues. There are big swings in the bill for customers during summer when they're using more water. And it's just, there's complexity. I mean, the city staff have to make sure the rate turns over at the right time, among other things. And so the updated rate structure that we have here basically gets rid of the seasonal differential. And so we've got the same base rate structure. We're not proposing any changes to what's already been adopted for 23. For the volume rates, for single family, we are recommending moving to a single 3-block structure that applies year round. And so we looked at usage data and came up with, based on winter average or indoor usage, that first tier is set at 10 CCF for 1,000 cubic feet bi-monthly. The second tier is set based on summer average usage, which is representative of typical indoor and outdoor usage. That is set at 17 CCF bi-monthly, and then anything above that gets that third block structure. Multifamily, commercial, and irrigation, we're recommending that those all go to a uniform rate. One thing that's interesting about the multifamily rate is that it's almost equal to the existing Block 1 rate. The Block 1 rate is $195, and the updated charge is $199. So that is consistent with the general finding when you have multifamily blocks, is because you scale the blocks with the number of dwelling units, almost all the usage falls into that first block. And so what you end up with is you have a rate that is effectively a weighted average of the existing 4-block structure. And it's slightly higher than the existing block 1 rate, just averaging all that together. So for me, I mean, this supports the recommendation to get rid of blocks in general for multifamily. And then commercial, there's a greater weighting toward higher usage during the summer months. And so they have a uniform volume rate, and then irrigation kind of the same deal. I mean, their usage is almost exclusively during the summer months, and so their rate reflects that. And so then looking at some of the impacts, we look at a single family Lifeline user that shows the relative difference in their bill. By and large, a Lifeline user is not, I mean, they'll see a slight increase, but nothing too crazy. And that's based on the fact that costs that were being recovered in the summer from the high users, those costs are getting spread to everybody, and particularly the lower users, by the fact that we're getting rid of that summer differential. And then we have a high user. The black line represents what they're currently paying, and the purple line represents what they would pay. And you can see in the summer, those bills go way down. I mean, they're still higher than the winter months, but you don't have that massive swing that you do under the existing structure. And then, I'm sorry.
Do we have any idea about what percentage of the city falls into this demographic?
So actually, I'll jump ahead to, let's see, right here. So this graph, there's a fair amount going on here, but if you look at the column graph in the background, this curve, this shows the distribution of the bills from 2021. So most of the bills are concentrated right around this level, maybe getting to 1,000 cubic feet. You have some higher users like way up here and even more so, but they're they're a small percentage of the total. And so part of it is, those high users, the ones that are vocal about the summer rate differential, are a relatively small portion of the customer base. But there are other reasons why there is an advantage to you getting rid of the summer differential, just because your revenues, they're less seasonal. So your cost, you're paying everybody's salaries, the same salary, every month. So spreading the cost recovery over the year instead of targeting that summer period is actually better for the utility from a financial stability perspective.
But what does it mean by survey group on that graph?
Survey group means everybody basically that was in that the comparable cities. So the ones that were in the SDC, like these cities, I include them in the rate comparison too. I chose to use the survey group. And for the purpose of that graph, the survey group excludes Bonnie Lake. I'm just showing you compared to everybody else. If I showed you everybody else, it would be a big mess of spaghetti that you would have a hard time making any sense of. So I think that the key point, you can see as I get back to that graph, we have our survey group minimum down here. This is like the lowest rates. And then we have, there's a dashed line somewhere in the middle here, and that's the median of the survey group. And then you have the upper end of the survey group over here. So this is just highlighting the range of what the other utilities do. And then the other lines show where the city falls in. And so you can see the bright blue line kind of right here. That's what the bill looks like at higher usage levels under the existing structure. And the updated structure brings you much more in line with the median of the group. So it puts you kind of middle of the road. And there's a slight increase down here at this level, but overall, pretty comparable to the middle of the road on water.
Councilmember Walden.
So I guess in just looking at this mathematical data here, when I'm looking at the Bonnie Lake line, you're saying that the other lines that are the other cities that were surveyed, for example, that Bonnie Lake is the only one that has a bit more of an upswing. Is that because I feel like all the other ones are gradual. They're gradual increasing lines, and Bonnie Lake is the one that has the sharp.
Yes, because Bonnie Lake is pretty much the only one with the summer block structure. So there's kind of that double hammering of high usage during the summer months.
Okay.
And I would note that that only represents the bill during the summer months. There's another line that's kind of closer to the median of what the current winter rates are like.
Okay.
It's sort of hard to show both of them at the same time on the same graph.
Councilmember Fullerton.
So the navy blue dotted line, Bonnie Lake 2023 proposed. So that's getting rid of those triple rates in the summer. So it would be more gradual.
Yes.
Well, I like that.
But of course, you had that one graph that shows, as I think Councilmember Evans pointed out, that charges have to go somewhere.
Yes.
So if you reduce the charges for the people with 3 acres of green lawn, you're going to increase the cost of grandma.
You will. That is correct. It's not going to show up super well on this graph just because of the scale. I mean, it might be a.
You had that other stacked bar thing that was more representative or not? Or?
There was a Lifeline user right there. So that would probably be the closest thing.
I meant the other one, I guess.
The one with the sharper.
So that is
That
the
one.
summer user. So they're going from the black line to the purple line. And so I think that the thing to remember is that these users are a relatively small percentage of the total. So to the extent that you're spreading over a much bigger base.
Sure. Yeah.
Just pay for what you use.
Yeah.
That was a question.
I'm sorry.
Why don't you just pay for what you use? How is grandma who has a postage stamp versus farmer who has, acreage, paying more?
So these graphs, I mean, they're not on the exact same scale. So part of it, if I showed them to scale, this graph you wouldn't see at all. I mean, so this one, I mean, the usage level is, basically, 3 to 6 CCF per billing period. And so, this one gets up to almost 200 in the summer months. So they're not paying more. It's just there's a reduction in this customer's bill that gets spread to the other users that are using less.
You have any idea, since it's sounds like a concept where, obviously the multi-block structure is basically discouraging high users or kind of trying to, modify their behavior. So that when you would, that's probably purely guessing. Obviously, if all of a sudden, I can water my lawn and I, Bob's been doing that and because he can afford it and my lawn's been brown and now I'm like, well, I can do it too now. So
there could be some of that. I mean, there's a concept called price elasticity where, I mean, if there's a change in the price, it causes changes in behavior. And so, for example, let's say we were going the other direction. So we were saying, we have right now a 3-block rate and now we're going to do a seasonal block rate. Mm-hmm. And then we're shifting all the costs to the summer. That's probably going to give people a strong incentive to cut usage during that time, and there would be a revenue loss from that. Going the other direction, I would expect, I mean, there might be some people that water more, and, they would pay more. I mean, this is all based on current usage patterns. This doesn't take into account any assumption of how they might change their behavior.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, if they could use more water, and then, I mean, that would mitigate the decrease in the revenue you get from them. But it's hard to tell exactly. I mean, they may have made investments in efficient fixtures and stuff that would last even if they change their behavior. So it's sort of hard to tell what the impact would be.
Councilmember McClemmons.
So I'm trying to normalize your 2 charts, your bill impact summary and then the 3/4 summary. So the scale obviously is different on the consumption, right? This is cubic feet and the other one's CCF. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So sorry. This is cubic feet bi-monthly consumption, and then the other one was bi-monthly in CCF.
And then the data would tend to indicate that the majority of if we have 20,000 residents in Bonnie Lake, the majority of them fall in that $200 a month. If I just count across that line,
It would be bi-monthly.
Right,
Yeah.
the bi-monthly, that the majority of the residents are in that $200 a month range.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would take away from this. Now, if you go back to your other chart,
note though that our water district is very large, so it's
Larger than the
Right,
residential.
right. Yeah, but I'm just thinking.
it goes up into Auburn, literally.
Right. No, yeah, it's huge, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how I get to, I'm just trying to figure out how I get to like that. The next chart, is it the next chart?
Oh, the high water user?
Yeah. Yeah, that high water. I'm just trying to understand the numbers there and figure out where the majority of those people are on this chart.
Yeah.
Because they obviously fall into this somewhere, right?
They do. I mean, part of the complexity with that is, for example, this customer has these readings. All 6 of these numbers are in this curve. So, I mean, literally, this is a tabulation of all the bills that you issued.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you wanted to get to an average impact, you sort of have to average, the bi-monthly consumption, and then you could find a place on this chart that would show kind of the typical bi-monthly bill. But yeah, this is looking at aggregate for the year, and this one is looking at throughout the year.
So what your other chart means to me is that the majority of people spend at 6 times $200, right? $1,200 a month, right?
A year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to swallow everything.
I mean, I have the same confusion. Yeah, I'm looking at the data where the majority of people are falling. And then I'm still trying to figure out, it is a little confusing that one is CCFs, one is cubic feet, because I'm trying to figure out, where these high users are falling and really how many they are.
Okay, so this goes up to 6,000 cubic feet, if I'm reading that right. So, so that would be 60 CCF.
Okay.
And so if we go to the high user here, 60 CCF, I mean, that's about twice what they use during the winter, but it's about a third of what they use in the summer.
Okay, but the ones in the middle are 130.
Yeah.
So they would be above?
So that would be, that would be basically double that 60. So it
would be off the chart.
They'd be off the chart. Like, I'd have to make the chart twice as big to show you that bill.
Right, yeah.
And then you wouldn't see anything because it's sort of small enough for the scale. But yeah, I mean, in general, the trend would be, I mean, just looking at the way this goes, most of these lines increase at a relatively gradual pace. I would say by the time, if you were on this trajectory, by the time we double the graph, I mean, this would be way, way up high. And the updated rate structure puts it more at the median.
So it feels like we're lowering the water bill, but we're really not.
This is revenue neutral to the existing structure, which means in aggregate, it's supposed to generate about the same amount as the existing structure. It's just shifting where that comes from. It's, either the customers right now, the customers that use a lot in the summer are the ones that are paying a huge amount based on that. And we're saying, let's make the structure more gradual and moderate, and then it reduces what they pay, raises what everybody else pays. It sort of it reduces the slope of that line, basically, and how the bill goes up with usage.
I think the reason why we're kind of struggling with this data, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but looking at this, we want to be able to give relief to, our average residents that are having still large bills. I don't mean bills in the thousands per se, where they're just anomalies. I'm talking about the people that, are paying upwards of $250 to $300 for their bill. But it sounds like what you're telling us is you would then like to the ones that are in the thousands to then increase basically our average person who is wanting us to lower their bill. Does that make sense?
It does. And so I think what I would suggest is there are multiple conflicting objectives that you have to weigh in making. and maybe that doesn't need to be said, but I mean, to frame it, I mean, we're not talking about changing the block structure to make the bills more affordable for low users. That's the whole reason for that discussion is A, there's a huge swing in the summer, and B, it's really complicated to administer the structure.
But what about not low users instead of just looking at data for low and high users, what about middle of the range users? How are they being affected?
Forget if I have that here. Maybe I don't. So they,
Because if it's revenue neutral, the charges have to go somewhere.
yeah. So I mean, they would. My guess is they probably pay a little bit more, but not necessarily dramatically more. I mean, again, we're taking a relatively small part of the customer base and we're redistributing some cost across the majority of the customer base. So, I mean, there will be an increase to lower users or even sort of moderate users. And I think on a percentage basis, the impact would probably be more to the low users compared to the moderate. But it sort of just takes the, if you think about the slope of the line, it's just smoothing it out. So it just decreases it and makes the bill increase more gradual. So if the concern is how do we make the rates more affordable? And again, I mean, this is a point that Ryan made. The water bill is not really the driver for the affordability issue. Right. It's really the sewer bill.
Well,
and so this is more about, you can address the summer issue and the peaking issue here. And then on the affordability side, we can look at the sewer rate. And we talked about that last time, and I'll hit on that again.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to suggest, I mean, really, if the council's idea here is we want to decrease the amount that our customers, our residential customers, our citizens are paying across the board, then you have to look elsewhere than sing with the rest. Sounded like it stopped working.
the microphone thing.
And I'm just throwing this out. I haven't looked at the numbers. I haven't looked at anything, but maybe you alter how much you're charging your commercial customers. Maybe you look at some other rate other than what the residential rates are, and you adjust that accordingly. It's, again, haven't looked at the numbers. I'm just kind of drawing where you could look to make the difference across the board for your residential customers.
Sorry. Yeah.
I feel like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like our people are upset about their water bills, especially their sewer bills. I don't even know if residents are aware that the sewer bills is what is having the largest impact for cost.
I would say no, they're not, because they believe everything they're reading on social media.
So which one is it? Is it the sewer that is driving up their costs? Okay.
And we're going to hit on sewer here in a minute, but
I'm going to jump ahead here.
We already did sewer.
Okay, so this is basically, so if you look at the chart here, Bonnie Lake is at the top of the sample bill comparison, but you see the blue shading here. You're right in line with what everybody is, at 7 CCF per month, right, which is kind of the average residential level. You're right in the middle of the road. The right. Sewer rate is what's high and what's putting you at the top of the comparison.
Well, and that water, because again, that's the average user.
Yes.
Right. So the scenario that we talked about for a little while was, reducing the bill for the significant high user.
Yes.
And moving those charges off to other users, which I don't know where, Councilmember Evans talked extensively about it a while back, but I don't know.
Actually,
shell game. Is that what's
yeah, there you go.
Well, and I would add,
we're still number one.
Right.
Actually, this actually, I guess, I think the question that was raised about how the proposed rates would impact the average user. Basically, the 3738 is that monthly water bill, and it would go up to 4074. So it would be, a little over $3, I think, per month.
Sure. Yeah. Because interestingly enough, we hear from those high users are the ones that, of course, scream, but appropriately enough, right? And that's, the council's legislative decision. I'm probably not going to be too happy about, reducing significantly high users' charges and then attributing that onto everyone else.
And there's stuff that we could do. I mean, so even if we move to a 3-block structure, we could make the differential between the different blocks, we could make it higher. So right now I try to keep it relatively moderate, but we could say that the block 3 rate is 2 times or 3 times the block 1 rate. And so, I mean, you could still hit the higher users without the seasonal block structure. The hard part is you then start, like if you're concerned about affordability, you have low income residents that are not low water users. And so that would hit them.
Councilmember Baldwin.
So I guess my question then becomes, when we're talking a high user, because Because even when I was looking at the data, it's saying that their bills could be 1,000, right? Or more. Did I read that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry, this one.
okay, yeah, okay. So those folks, if we're looking at 138 to 191 CCF, maybe not even the middle of the road, but what would a person with like an average, sprinkler for a single family home? What is their average CCF usage? I'm trying to make a comparison of like, why is their bill $1,287?
Well, because I mean, if we get rid of the CCF, I mean, they're using 19,000 cubic feet of water in that September.
Well, what are they doing?
Well, I apologize if I can jump in here for a second, if I sound a little frustrated, but this is the rub at the staff level that we've been talking about for a long time, and we get hammered because we're being told that we're robbing everyone. But the fact is that if you got a $1,200 bill and you want it cheaper, use less water. That's why those tiered rates were put in to begin with. And I can only say for myself, and this is just me, I live in an HOA, fortunately not one that requires me to keep my yard green. So there is an issue there that I think is worthy of discussion. But I don't water my yard during the summer. And I told my HOA I was not going to.
Okay.
And fortunately, I have a pretty cool HOA, and they're okay with that. I realize not everybody has that flexibility. There are requirements in some of these agreements, but I think there's a little bit of a failure in the logic to look at an expensive bill and say, how can we decrease that with not looking at the personal responsibility people have to monitor their usage and decrease it accordingly if they don't want to pay that amount.
Well, because I water my lawn in the summer. And I don't have like acreage or anything like that. My bill's not 1,287. So then it does make me wonder then, like,
Just think how
what
cheap
are they
it would be if you
watering?
Didn't water your lawn.
I
What are
think
they watering?
I think a lot of times I won't say a lot of times, and actually Steph could speak to this probably much better than I, but there are people with irrigation systems out there that don't realize they're watering as much as they think, no, I said it, the timer's doing this and that. Yeah. And we can go look if they have the right kind of meter, we can look at, and we can tell them when their irrigation system is coming on and off.
Is this usually an irrigation system thing that kicks it up that much?
So I would say, looking at the average residential user, there is some watering going on. Like most people would do some, and that's baked into that 700 cubic feet per month.
Okay.
So this is something that's nothing closely resembling average.
I just don't feel good about it. There's just something, it doesn't feel good to lower like that and then be like, hey, let's spread it out. That just feels kind of icky, if I'm being honest.
But overall, if you see the very bottom right, the annual bill, I thought it is for the high water user, my apologies. Not the average user.
Okay.
So the average user, if we go back, it was a little over $3 per month. So that'd be $36 per year.
That's multifamily. Can you go to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking about this comparison here showing the water bill under the existing and proposed at 7 CCF. So basically, that's a difference of roughly $3, and if that's per month, so it'd be $36 a year, something along those lines.
An $11 savings a month overall.
Yeah.
So it does save the average user $11 a month, 110.
Okay.
$20.
And that's because of the sewer rate recommendation.
Yeah, that's gotta go down.
How are we lowering the sewer rate?
We are lowering the sewer rate by
Talking to Sumner.
Yeah.
Talking to Sumner.
no. So
How's that working out for us?
How's that working out?
So the sewer rates have historically been set to generate cash for capital funding, and it's been based on depreciation expense. And so what we have done for the purpose of this run is to say we could relax that policy temporarily and reduce the rate based on the fact that we're not having to generate almost $2 million a year in cash for capital projects that our capital plan shows we don't need right now. And that's, I think, the main reason that we're able to reduce the rate. We're looking at the reserve balances and we're like, we have more than enough to cover the CIP, and we're just going to alleviate rate pressure by cutting that funding temporarily, and then looking at the capital plan, setting the rates to generate the cash that you need, but otherwise kind of sticking to that.
Yeah, there was one word in there that I didn't really like. It's called temporarily.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that there's an end date.
Yeah.
I'm saying this doesn't commit you to never funding it again.
Chris, could you move forward maybe to that part of the presentation that shows what the increases would look like, or decreases in this case?
That?
Yeah. So I just wanted him to show that so we could get a sense of the span of time we're talking about right now. But optimally, what we would like to get to with all of our utilities is that yearly adjustments are smaller and just occur according to the increase in costs we see across the board, right?
Yeah.
And so that's we've managed, I think, depending upon which scenario we go with, to do that in water, and we're also just about seeing that here now in sewer. So I just wanted to bring attention to that.
Yeah. What we did here is we said, how far could we decrease the rates in 24, and basically set 25 at 0, and then begin with, or actually, I'm sorry, 23 reducing the rates, and then 24 set to 0, and then 25 and thereafter we go with CPI. And that's basically what we're looking at here.
Yeah, but then in 2028, we're back up to almost the 129,000. So we're lowering it just so we can raise it again gradually.
Yes.
And I mean, we're still going to be less than $129, but we're basically back up to $129. So,
well, the reality is
what's
costs
the
continue to
point?
increase. And so, I mean, we could say, let's freeze. I mean, I think that was the initial run that we did. We said, just freeze the rates and don't increase them. But then it was like looking at, well, the impacts on the water side and how could we provide relief? It's like, well, you can reduce the sewer rate right now, but you will eventually have to increase it to keep up with costs.
And I liken it to what would happen if your salary stayed consistent from here on out, and you never got a raise. The price for eggs and milk and whatever continues to rise, but your dollar just doesn't go as far. I totally get where you're coming from. Believe me, I do. It's a balancing act, but we can't afford to just keep them static.
Councilmember McClymons. Sorry.
Go ahead.
so I'm just like looking at, I'm not going to be here necessarily in 2028. That's up to the people, but I certainly wouldn't want to put that on the next council.
Are you already making a proclamation?
By the way, I mean, I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, so we lower it here in 2023, and then we have another council in 2028, and then of course they're in trouble with their constituents because they're like, oh yeah, we're raising it by 3%. We're going to raise it by 3% again. We're going to raise it by 3% again. And now we're back up to 2023. Because that's kind of what we're going through right now with raising the rates from where they were when I got elected. Now we've gone up 8% in 2023. And I'm kind of feel like, well, this is my fault because I didn't stop the rates from going up. But I don't really appear to have control over that.
So, I mean, the city's standard policy is to do, like Ryan said, to keep adjusting the rates so that they're consistent with costs. What I view this is basically we're doing a correction right now to provide some relief, and then beginning in 25, you're just defaulting to that policy. You could say, we're just going to freeze the rate for the 5 years and we're not going to do anything. That's a perfectly viable option. And honestly, the sewer utility would end up with more cash for projects and things if you did that. But then you have the increase, the shift from the water rate structure change. And so that's going to add without an offsetting reduction. The reason why this makes sense is because it would offset some of that impact. But it's a complete policy decision which way you want to go.
Councilmember McClymons.
Can you go to chart 19? I just want to make sure. I'm trying to digest the data, and I'm kind of a dweeb about this stuff. So
is this 19? Or,
no.
Sorry, this one?
Yeah, but for the water is 19. That's sewer 32. That's 19. Okay, so if I understand this right, we have $3 million in reserve funds this year, And at the end of 2028, we'll have on the order of, let's approximate that to be 4.5, maybe 5. So our reserve will increase over the year.
These are not necessarily reserves. This is the annual revenue level. And so the solid line represents the annual water rate revenue at existing rates.
Right.
And the dashed line represents annual water rate revenue at the proposed rates. And so, yes, these increases are generating cash for the capital plan.
Correct. That's what I want. So the O&M, so like the $7 million for the new reservoir, right? Is in there somewhere, right?
Not directly. This is annual rate funded revenue requirement. So the cost of the reservoir would be on the capital side. Exactly. And I mean, if you issue you take out the loan to fund it, the debt service would be included in this graph.
I thought that green was capital. It says capital on it.
Let's see. So green is debt service. And this one, I would say, this is our baseline, which is based on the pay-as-you-go strategy. This does not include the drinking water SRF loan. So if you take that loan out, the dash line, the slope would go down. So we'd be looking at like 3% increases instead of 5.5%. And the debt service chunk would go up. So basically, that light greenish block at the top of the chart, the top of the column graph, that would shrink and the debt one would grow. But it would basically, this line would move down. This would get smaller, this would get bigger to fill the difference. So it's just shifting it around.
So you have listed reserves and capital on that one.
So reserves meaning that is cash above current cost. That would go to funding reserves and being used for capital as needed. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, it's not part of that, whatever they call that, reserve for the bond assurity?
No. That's like, so the water fund has like what we call an operating reserve for kind of just working capital. And then there's a capital, a pool of capital resources for projects. And that's what it's going into.
Okay.
And so historically this was, okay, we're funding depreciation expense. So that would be a fixed increment. But we're allowing that the funding that's available for capital projects is set by the rate increases based on the needs. And the rate increases are set to generate what's needed.
What's Kelly thinking over there? Because, this is a revenue neutral proposal. So, on the water side, what's your thoughts?
I'm just trying to understand, right? I wanted to compare that to sewer because what I thought I heard him say was the burden on building the system out on sewer is not there. So that's why when you go to chart 32, the sewer chart, that reserve and capital delta is much smaller. So what's really I find interesting about this chart is the scale is almost equivalent. The operating expenses are close, right around $8 million, but the amount of reserve and capital we need is significantly higher on the water side.
Could be, right? Driven by the projects.
It's driven by the project.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is they're driven by what we have planned for capital projects, and the load, if you will, of capital projects on the water side is much more intensive. Higher cost.
Reservoirs, all kinds of fancy stuff.
No, but I'm just baffled because we spend all of our money on sewer.
Well,
but this is looking forward at what you need to spend in the future.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So the sewer is that operational piece that's killing us.
Yeah.
Right. Well, but the operation O&M expenses are the same almost.
Yeah.
So we're charging more for sewer, but the O&M's more. The capital is less, but we're charging more. And then the debt service is less, but we're charging more. So we're charging more. It's just there's less of a burden. So that's why I wanted to compare these two, because I'm like, math is a cruel mistress here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it.
So part of it is, so in these graphs, both of these graphs, that light green block for reserves and capital, that is basically just the difference between the dash line and everything else. So basically, this is the capacity for capital project funding that rates can support at the levels we're proposing.
Right.
And so for sewer, we don't need as much as water. And so that's why water, it's bigger. The other thing to keep in mind is when we're looking at what an individual customer is paying, you have rate structure differences. And so, the sewer rate structure doesn't have the blocks that the water rate does. And so that's another thing that contributes to the difference in the water bill versus the sewer bill.
So, just for commentary purposes for fellow council members, I agree with the charges every, increasing basically, which 3% is way underneath CPI probably projections. So, you were talking about that because if you don't do that, just exactly like the staff was talking about, you wouldn't expect your salary to stay the same over the years. Shockingly, our employees are going to demand salary increases and benefits and da-da-da. So you could, say no to that, but you're going to get yourself in a hole later on. And then furthermore, you take those and you put them in a policy and you put them in the ordinance and they automatically get plugged in there. But like you mentioned, future councils have the ability to go in there and say, hey, we didn't need that one. We can stop that one. We've done that before where we looked at the revenues that came in. Maybe we get some big loans that come in. If that one that comes in from the feds that we didn't allocate for, then you can look and see, and then you can trim off some packages.
And the caveat is that we're showing 3% increases because that's the CPI rate that we're assuming. Yeah. Obviously, the adjustment will be based on what.
Are we going to be there? What economist is showing CPI at 3?
It's anyone's guess, but I will say the state's Economic Revenue Forecast Council shows it going down to 2.5 or lower by 25.
Nice.
And so it would be nice if it happens. I have no idea if it will. I say if I had to bet, I'd probably say not. But at the end of the day, we have to make assumptions, and they're going to be wrong. Yeah. So I think if for some reason inflation is 5%, then it'll be a 5% increase. And that's sort of how it is. Sure. But easily explained by the fact that this is what inflation is.
Do you have that one chart that shows the fees of sewer between, like Sumner and Bonnie Lake?
Bill comparison.
Yeah, the bill. Well, sewer charges in Sumner are what have you, $80 and $83, and suppose Bonnie Lake is $129. Do you have any particular information on the differential between 80 and 100?
I will say I don't think I've done a cost of service analysis for Sumner to figure out, what should commercial be paying versus single family or whatever. I don't know what it would say, but I mean, there are differences in the customer base. There are differences. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Sure. Now you're going to yell at me.
Of course it is.
Ooh, wow. Thank you. So the difference is largely in the base fee. We do have a high base fee here at the city of Bonnie Lake, in addition to the volumetric.
Well, because of course the public is saying, "Hey, we're going into the same sewer plant."
Yeah.
Why isn't my charge the same? I'm a resident in Bonnie Lake. I'm going into a sewer plant, and I would suspect that I have some transport charge, attributed to Bonnie Lake. But really, it costs me $40 more a month to get my sewer to Sumner. I'll deliver it.
Yeah, and I think it's a valid point. And as we move forward into this next phase of sitting down with Sumner to discuss the ILA, those are some of the questions we'll be asking.
Mm-hmm. Because even to my extent, that's just political commentary on my part, it would be, the one sewer plant should be, there's 2 cities, 1 sewer plant. I would really like to push for a commonality between the charges associated with the people that are using the plant. Because, they should have the same philosophy. Sumner can be doing a lot of, cities can do different things with philosophy to, charge SDCs more or less and things like that. But, when our residents in the area look at that and they're like, I can't explain right now why there's such a differential.
And I mean, your rates are based on all your costs beyond the treatment plant, and theirs are based on theirs. So there can be differences there.
Right. Yeah.
And a rate structure thing as well. So
yeah. Ryan, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Then, in regards to these conversations with Sumner, as far as city staff talking with Sumner's city staff. Is some of this policy related? Like, is it something where, we should be in conversations with, other people, like as far as the mayor or the other council members? Because I know that the city, the staff is going to work hard to try to come to some sort of a negotiation. But to me, it sounds like some of what is happening could be just policy in general.
I think there will be a point at which the council will definitely need to weigh in. I think once we have a revised interlocal agreement hammered out,
Okay.
that would be one milestone. And certainly us as staff are always available to you to get information and discuss different
Oh, I mean like them,
like
the Sumner City Council members, as in like they made policy decisions that have then resulted
I don't
in
know.
these differences of.
What's their secret sauce? How does
I just kind of wonder like
how do
how
they
did
have
they
that
get
rate?
roped into
I can
this?
appreciate the question. I don't have an answer for you right now as to what they've done on their end necessarily. Perhaps looking, at their sewer plan would shed some light on some of their adopted policies. I don't know though that necessarily accounts for the differences that we see here in the rates. But I mean, I'm happy to look into that more. I don't have an answer for you tonight though on.
Because I think if we're talking about the base rate, like you said, because again, we're going to pay differences because obviously we're moving water or moving, water with substances in it. And, but yeah, I just wonder, is it overstepping if we're in contact with council members in Sumner to say, hey, as a council, we have been looking at these things. We've had extensive discussions on this, and our city is going to be talking with your city. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want anything that you as a city and them as a city do, and then you guys are stuck kind of in this position because some sort of policy has to change.
Sure, I can't speak to the ins and outs of whether it's appropriate or not for you to reach out to a counterpart in Sumner on the council. I mean, I think that's just up to you and your call.
Okay.
They're our captive customer, of course. So we are to them, right?
Yeah.
Currently. So it is, major. There's the technical details, and we let staff work out on all that hard,
Yeah.
and they do all that fancy stuff in the background.
Right.
But there are policy decisions that we could pursue, and
With them.
with
Oh.
policies of we could say, we're done. We're going to Pierce County. Pierce County's taking over the sewer system. They're going to pay us $12 million for it, and we're going to walk away from the sewer system, right? There's all kinds of, you can do the same thing on the water side. You could go to Cascade Water Alliance today and you can say, you know what, this thing is costing us too much money. You guys can do it for half the charge. Here it is. Have fun. There's those high-end policy decisions that are available to councils to look at. There are ramifications to all that stuff that are very large, though.
And I would just add that there could be substantial costs to making some of those changes. I just want to make sure that data point gets set out there. Exactly.
I mean, the one thing I'll contribute is just, your share of the costs of the Sumner plant are based on a capacity allocation. And so it would not explain why.
But our share of that's O&M.
I think it's capital too.
No. Well, we only pay them O&M. We've already paid them. I don't know if we still have loan payments for improvements that we've done previously, but
I
The
thought
capital plan includes upgrades at the.
we were paying into that.
the capital is kind of a side subject that we are arguing about currently. At least I am. But the O&M, they charge us for actually gallons going down there and whatever the how viscous, whatever it is, the TMW,
Oh,
whatever
ew.
charges.
How viscous the
So
liquid is.
there's a
they
pretty
actually measured
substantial computation that goes with calculating the monthly service charge, but there is a capital project component in there that we're paying.
Because if it's in there and we're actually charging about it, then we should chat more
Can do
sooner
that.
than later. But they do. They have a budget for what it costs them to run the plant, and then whoever uses it and how much they use it, they attribute the charges split. So that's why I'm saying, why the heck is their charges less than ours? Because it's per gallon, whatever it is.
It's not because of the treatment.
60/40.
Our sewer doesn't cost them more to treat than their citizens. The way they calculate it.
We need to get that down even more.
Well,
Just a suggestion too, I realize I think by code you can go till 9, but we still have the stormwater rates to go through. Just a plug, keeping a little bit.
Okay, so hopefully this will be a pretty short discussion, but we'll see. So the table on the top was from the last time I was here. Basically, we were looking at 11.5% annual increases in the stormwater rate to generate funding for the capital projects that's needed. And so we ran an alternative where we applied the $4.2 million of ARPA funding to stormwater projects. And so what that does is it allows us to reduce the rate increases to CPI. So 2023, that would be the CPI adjustment based on inflation and the consumer price index. And then we just default to our assumed 3% after that. But again, in practice, it would be whatever the inflationary adjustment is calculated as. But ARPA funding would enable you to do an inflationary adjustment strategy for stormwater. And so then you can kind of see in the combined bill with that. I mean, you're looking at an increase. I think it's $1.61 a month if I'm $1.41.
Oh, with the ARPA. Yes.
Yeah, with the This reflects the recommended scenario. So this is recommend on the water side. Use the loan proceeds for the reservoir and do basically CPI beginning next year. Sewer would be the rate reduction for this year, no adjustment for next year, and then CPI after that. And then stormwater would be CPI beginning July 1st of this year.
So that example right there was just a big assumption on our part. I realize that the council still needs to discuss ARPA and how it would truly be used. But this is one suggestion. We are seeing stormwater costs just like either of the other utilities. It gets more and more expensive. And as I've mentioned before, the stormwater utility is just that. It's an enterprise fund just like water and sewer. And so, again, that $4.2 million wasn't meant to be too presumptuous. We just threw it in there to show as an example what could potentially be that ARPA money could be used for. But I realize that discussion still has to occur at this level here. So,
all right. I think that basically summarizes the recommendations. So I mentioned kind of what we were talking about for water, sewer, stormwater, your feedback on that. Recommending that you update the water rate structure, so eliminating the winter-summer rate differentials. Single family moving to a single 3-block structure that applies all year. Everybody else moving to a uniform volume rate by class. So basically, one rate applies to all their usage. On the sewer side, the recommendation also takes into account reducing the sewer volume cap from 10 to 8 CCF. And we discussed this last time. That would reduce sewer revenues by about 2%. And that's already factored into the results that I've shown here. And then on the SDC side, we're recommending that you adopt the updated charges. We can potentially look at phasing some of those in. Oh, one other thing, actually, I should mention. The recommended scenarios have an impact to the SDCs. So if we take out the loan for the water SDC, the loan for the water reservoir, that increases the debt load. And one of the things in calculating the water SDC, let me go right here. And so basically, what happens is if we take out that loan, there's debt that customers would then pay through rates, and we adjust for that to not charge somebody for an asset through the SDC and through their rate payment, through the debt service that's included in it. So basically, we would show instead of being $53.50, the water SDC would increase to $51.94 per residential equivalent if you decide to go and take that loan and use it for the project. The stormwater SDC, similarly, if you use ARPA funds, we would consider that to be a grant effectively, and it would reduce the utility fund investment, and that would decrease the SDC from $16.65 to $13.13 per equivalent unit. And so with the recommended scenario for water, we are looking at a water SDC of $51.94, a sewer SDC of $11,927, and then a stormwater SDC of $13.13. And if you decide not to go those ways, then potentially, we could do the original baseline updated values. But I would say don't make that decision based on what you think you can get through the SDC. So if the loan helps you spread the rate increases and have a sensible rate strategy, do that. Don't do a higher rate increases just so you can put an extra $100 in the SDC.
Do you recall what are they for the enterprise tax across the enterprise? Are they uniform or what? We had like 12. I think there's like 12% enterprise tax on this. Is it on? I think it's on water is 12, but I don't know if it's on sewer and storm.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'd have to.
Yeah, no worries. I didn't recall.
But whatever it is, it's worked into the forecast because
Yeah,
tax is
right.
embedded in the.
Yeah.
I have two. That's why. I thought we were against a loan, or is that something else? Did I miss something?
Well, no, I would, that was my mention the last time is like if there was I wanted to be sure where the council was at on that, whether there was, that was like, no, don't use that or do use that. Or because if you want to make, you can see by his graph or his chart that if you want to make the philosophical decision not to use a loan, you're going to have to increase the rates significantly more. And I don't understand. I can't fathom why you don't want to use a loan.
Well, I guess what would be the negative impact of the loan? Because to me, a loan,
I know,
pay it back.
Yeah, you have to pay it back,
Yeah.
but it's over time. It's a tool in my mind that businesses use to smooth out rate structures.
Okay.
And being that you're a municipality, you have this like thing that's, sewer's not going to go away, arguably for hundreds of years. So, it's not like you're going to have to pay it off or have a balloon payment or anything like that. So,
Okay.
But if you don't want to use it, fine. You just have to realize that there was a tool that was available and you said, no, I don't want to use a loan because I don't want to go into debt. I'm going to increase my monthly rate to my customer.
Right. Okay.
I mean, and we ran the debt scenario because last time the question came up, well, what is the benefit of the loan? How much would it help
Yeah.
save? And so that's why we ran it. The key downside, especially if it's like a drinking water SRF loan, the key downside is there's interest that you pay over the life of the loan, but you are spreading those costs to basically growth over the next 20 years. And so it'll be potentially a lower cost per customer. I actually did that analysis for another client recently where they're like, well, we pay more in interest, but doing a present value, basically you say, here's the rate increases that a customer would pay with the debt and without the debt. And the debt scenario showed, for reasonable terms, the cost per customer was actually lower in the debt scenario because you could spread it out over a greater number of customers. And so I would say I wouldn't let interest, especially like a low interest loan from the state. I would not say that should deter you from. That's the price of spreading the costs out.
Yeah, I would add that loan in particular. It's a 20-year payback term at 2.25%, which is a really great interest rate compared to what we're going to see, elsewhere or just personal loans, that kind of thing. Just to check the box, we did actually bring this to council back in November, and you guys gave the thumbs up to apply for it. But just because we went through the process and we've been awarded doesn't mean you have to accept the loan. Just throwing that out there so you kind of know what your options are.
Okay. And then the last question of the two-part series is, when are we switching to monthly billing? Is that still up in the air? Is that?
We're currently, this month, we have attempted to see if we could read everything.
Okay.
Because going to monthly bills is going to increase staff.
Need.
Everything we do, double every month.
Yeah.
So we're trying to see if we can do it. Right now, it's hard because we still have 2,800 meters to read manually.
Gotcha. Oh, because we haven't changed the meters or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. So that really does hinder us in that. We're going to try and do it by this June, but again, we're still testing the waters to see how it's going to work.
Okay. Okay. That is all. That is all. Me.
Anything else? Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well done. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next, I believe we're still going through this. Still open discussion. Holy cow. No, nothing from Tom? Holy cow.
Yeah. I forgot.
Okay. I'll take up for Councilmember Watson. And I attended the Communities for Families Coalition meeting.
Nice.
With Chief Jeter and the mayor. The mayor talked about the city of Bonnie Lake. I just gave some basic knowledge type stuff on it. I can tell you that the school district is currently down 20 bus drivers, which is a lot. And they're currently giving a $2,000 incentive to go be a bus driver.
I'm out of here. Where's the app? Where?
There's an app right here I have for you.
Nice, love it. Thank you. I can double my salary.
So that's the main thing I'll go over from there. And there 4/15, so April 15th, there is a open house at the Bonnie Lake Library.
Sorry, what, when? Oh, April 15th, yes. Jasmine had said that, yes.
Thanks for going, Terry.
No problem.
Thank you.
Wasn't feeling good that day.
You must not have been. I was surprised not to see you. Any other open discussion? No? Okay.
No.
We're going to move on to review of council minutes. Councilmember Watson.
We got 3 corrections that have been taken care of.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Now I'll go on to the second discussion item of the night. Madam Clerk, I guess, who's not there anymore.
We lost everybody.
Chuckle dudes.
Oh,
This is discussion item AB 2441, motion M 2341. The council motion would be to appoint a council member to the Sumner Bonnie Lake School District Capital Facility Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Very good.
excellent. Any discussion on the item? Councilmember McClymans.
This is near and dear to my heart for so many different reasons. So if somebody would nominate me, I'd gladly serve on this.
I second that.
Be happy to nominate
I'll
you.
third that.
Okay.
We nominate you.
Okay, there we go. So then we need a all in favor of Councilmember McClymans serving on that committee. Say aye.
I.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Nice.
I have a question about that.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
can we-
I think I actually did that out of order. Now I'm looking here, right? Because it's a discussion and action item. So we're actually supposed to have citizens' comments on
Right.
this. as
Oh, I
well.
did see that. 1,
Just
2, 3.
noticed that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, sorry, we have to step back a minute. So if nobody else has any comments, we can go to the citizens and see if there are any comments there. Oh, Councilmember Fullerton.
I was just wondering if we're going to have like an alternate. I would like to be an alternate for that if it's needed.
Okay.
And you call him, he'll call you when he can't go.
Yep.
There
Yeah,
you go.
There you
exactly.
Are we able to check and see if there's anybody online that wants to speak on
I
this?
don't see any hands.
Who is on? Calm down, Tom.
Mic drop.
Any
All right.
citizens want to discuss?
So I guess I'll just have to say this too. So this is your time to address the council on item AB 23-41, motion M 23-41 only. You have 5 minutes. State your name and address for the record, please. And it doesn't seem like there's anybody that wants to do that. So we will close that. Any other council discussion on this issue? No. Okay. So now we can go and have the vote again. So all in favor of appointing Councilmember McClymans to that, say aye.
I.
Any opposed? Very good. There's no executive session, and we are closed. And
Oh.
thank you.
Right. We did it. Oh.
I'm not used to reading these things the way.
Yeah. Like me that drags it.
It's like everything. This one's all so bold, and I'm like looking for something. I can't find it.
Nobody shows up. Like public complaint.
I looked over, I'm like,
What did you need?
and I was like,
Yeah, I'm getting lost, and I just should have gone back.
Hey, Ryan.
hopefully, what does the Brown tell you to do?
Wasn't directed.
No, this is what the to say. But
You want to call?
I don't even.
I'll see you tomorrow.
So I'm just like, where are we?
All right. Thank you. Good job. Appreciate your
Warner. Why?